Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and today we are going to be going back in time to the 1990s, and we are going to be discussing why I feel Kimberly had the best exit ever from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So, I recently rewatched some episodes of the original show. In fact, I recently rewatched it again back in 2020, about 5 years ago, and I watched all three seasons from start to finish, and I also rewatched all of Power Rangers Zeo. And for the most part, the show still held up very well. Some of it was better than I remembered, and while there were a couple of corny moments, by and large, it was a fantastic show, and I still say to this day that nothing will ever come close to matching the epicness and magic of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series. But, however, I would be lying to say that it was a perfect show because it wasn't, and far from it. And when I was rewatching the entire show, one thing that always stood out to me the most was the way the original characters were written out of the show. And even in Zeo, to a point, you know, I feel that, some of the original characters in the show and their departures weren't handled very well. Now, traditionally, with most TV shows, when a character is leaving, they would usually kill them off, or they would come up with a reason why that character has to leave. A prime example was, of course, in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, was the departures of Jason, Zack, and Trini. Three of them left to go to the World Peace Summit and become ambassadors. But I noticed that something wasn't right. Some of the scenes, some of the footage didn't match up well with some of the current new footage. And I didn't learn until years later that the real reason for this was because the original cast members had already left the show, because we never really saw them on screen. You had these horrendous sound alikes which sounded nothing like the original guys, and it just wasn't very good, and you could see that things weren't right. And another prime example was in Power Rangers Zeo, with the way Billy had left the show. Now, Billy had been, one of the original cornerstones of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and by the time we get to Zeo, he had no powers, but he had become like the main inventor and chief engineer for all of the Zords and all of the weapons and all the gadgets that the team would use in battle. But I just felt that with the way he was written out, the show was a bit suspect. Obviously, I would learn the real reason was because of what was going on behind the scenes. But there was one character out of all of the original members of the team who I felt had the best exit ever, and their departure was handled very well, with a lot of class and a lot of respect, and they went out in such a tremendous way with the best send off, and that was, of course, Kimberly. Now, Kimberly, of course, as we all know, was the original Pink Ranger, had been there since the beginning, and what they did for Kimberly for her departure was they came up with a 10-part story arc, which to me was excellent stuff. And a lot of that was due to Amy Jo Johnson having a lot of say and having a lot of input in the way her character should leave. And I loved what they did. They didn't just do the whole thing of lose the powers, next episode, gone. What they did for Kimberly was a slow build. And some of it did mirror similarities to when Tommy lost his Green Ranger powers. So I thought that was a nice little nod to Tommy losing his powers, and they came up with the same sort of thing for Kimberly, but just went in a different way. And of course, this all led to Kat becoming her replacement slash successor, who was played brilliantly by the lovely and talented Catherine Sutherland, who is my all-time favourite Pink Ranger. But I would be wrong to ignore Amy Jo Johnson's contributions as the Pink Ranger. Obviously, one of the most iconic characters ever. So I thought the way they built up Kimberly leaving and then Kat replacing her was done ever so well. And I would be lying to say that I was a little bit bummed out that Kimberly was going to be gone from the show because, you know, she had been such a huge part of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers since the beginning. And with her leaving, it was just like, oh, there goes another original. But we still got Tommy and Billy there. But losing Kimberly, who was more or less the backbone for the originals, and for her to leave, I would be lying. It was a bit sad. I would have liked if she stayed till the very end of season 3, and then Kat comes right at the end, like they did with Tanya, and then boom, straight into Zio. But she left about halfway towards the end of season 3. But her departure, unlike the original members of the team, Kimberly had quite possibly the best send off ever from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the fact that they came up with a 10-episode story arc, the way it was executed, the way it was written, everything, the way it was handled, she got to go out with class, dignity, and I thought they gave her a tremendous send off. And quite frankly, it was well deserved because for all of her contributions to the show, I wouldn't have it any other way. The only thing I probably would have preferred is maybe if she could have lasted all the way up to the end of season 3 and then Kat successfully steps into her shoes. But she left a bit earlier, which was fine. I understand that. And Amy Jo Johnson's reasons for leaving was quite straightforward, really. There was no ill feeling or leaving on bad terms. The answer was quite simple. She just wanted to move on and pursue different acting opportunities in her career, and I respect that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, she felt her time was coming to an end, and she felt that the Kimberly character had run its course, and maybe it did to a point when you look back at it, because there was really nothing more to say, really, story wise. You know, maybe it was time for a change. You know, I was a little bit bummed out, but that she was leaving, but I thought the way they handled her exit was done very well. And trust me when I tell you, as you all know, none of the original guys from the show had a good exit. So that to me puts Kimberly above all of them. And I feel her departure story arc was definitely one of the highlights of season 3 because that was the one that I remember the most. Aside from the Zords getting trashed and the Ninja Zords debuting, Kimberly's departure probably is, for me, probably the standout story arc because it was done so well. And that's something that doesn't happen much. You know, a character getting to go out their way and go out the right way as well. But I'm glad that happened, and I'm glad Amy Jo Johnson got to have her character go out the way she wanted to go out, and she deserved it. You know, after all her contributions, why not? And that doesn't happen very often. You know, someone getting to go out the way they want. And like I said earlier, most of the original members of the Power Rangers team didn't get that kind of send off. So I'm glad Kimberly did. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of the way Kimberly was written out of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? Do you think she had the best exit? Did you like the fact that they came up with a 10-episode story arc? Would you prefer if she had stayed right to the very end of season 3? Or do you think it was the right time for her to leave the way she did? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.